All right, thank you for tuning in to Chompin at the Bit. This is episode 25. This episode we're going to do my recap of Week 5 in the NFL. I'll take a look at the top stories from this past week. Normally, I would do top 5 teams after each week, but I feel like going forward, I want to expand that to top 10 teams. So this will be the first week where I pick top 10 teams after Week 5. And then we'll take a look at the situation that just happened with the Tennessee Titans. They got back on the field finally this week after a couple of weeks off. Just wanted to see if maybe the NFL can learn something from baseball and what they had happen with the Miami Marlins. And of course, I'm going to end the show with my look back at my picks, see how well I did. So to get us kicked off, let's start with top stories from this past week. I'm sure most of you either watched the game as it was a nationally televised game or may have seen a clip of it by now. But, I mean, Dak Prescott had a gruesome injury. And, you know, it was a play that he's done so many times. You know, pressure came in his face. He scrambled out of the pocket to his left. Logan Ryan made a legal tackle, just that his leg got caught up underneath him. And I don't know how many of you may have seen the Gordon Hayward injury, but when I saw Prescott and he immediately grabbed his leg, the first thing I thought of was Gordon Hayward. It looked basically the same. I mean, both their reactions are kind of similar, but yeah, I mean, it was already a big year for Prescott, as, you know, he's betting on himself this year. He didn't take the Cowboys contract in the offseason. Now you do wonder what this injury does in terms of, you know, negotiations after the year. My thought is, you know, I think the Cowboys will probably look to re-sign him anyway. It kind of seems like that's what Jerry Jones has said, but you never know. Now, I think Prescott is a guy where, you know, he's still young enough that an injury like this, I think they called it a dislocated ankle and maybe a fractured ankle. And he went into surgery the same night on Sunday. So his timetable's already started. I think they said like 4 to 6 months. So like I said, I think he's still young enough that even if he has to change his game a little bit, he is a pretty accurate quarterback. So he should be able to be effective when he comes back from the injury. But once again, you never know. So it could be something where he gets a new contract, but it's probably, you know, incentive laden based off of how many games he plays or, you know, starts, something like that. They'll word it some way that if he does come back from the injury and looks like how he did before, he'll be able to make his money. If not, then he'll get a reduced rate. So that's something to look forward to. But, you know, I mean, it was an unfortunate injury. I mean, those are the dangers of football. But, you know, hope for a speedy recovery from him, and, you know, hope he gets back on the field and looks the same way that he did before. Second biggest story of the week was the Falcons, you know, finally listened. I know a lot of you have heard me say when talking about the Falcons that they need to get rid of Dan Quinn. Now, he's not the only problem in Atlanta, but they finally listened, and Quinn was given his walking papers after another weak showing against the Carolina Panthers, where the Panthers basically bullied the Falcons. I mean, they ran the ball down their throat. The Falcons were missing tackles left and right. You know, Julio Jones didn't play again, but it was interesting watching the game because, you know, that Arthur Blank, the owner, he goes down on the field late in the game anyway. That's his thing. It's just that this past game, it just looked a little different because, you know, he was down there. He had Dimitrov down there and Rich McKay, and they're all kind of looking more intently onto the field. So the minute I saw the camera show the three of them, it started going through my head that, you know, this could actually be his final game. And then, of course, later Sunday night, there was breaking news that was going out, across YouTube and I believe NFL Network and stuff, where they said that Dan Quinn was relieved of his duties, and they named Raheem Morris, who's actually the defensive coordinator, which the defense has been a big issue for many years now. But he's the interim coach, so I guess it's his show for the rest of the year. I'm not expecting him to land the job going into next year, but I mean, you got to finish out the year with somebody. So, of course, some teams, when they make that change with the coach, the very next game you see kind of renewed energy in the team, and you may get the best game out of that team. So, will the Falcons do that against the Vikings? We'll have to wait and see. Third story for me, we finally got to see the Titans on the field. It's been a couple of weeks. I was wondering what they would look like, and they completely surprised me. They came out, and you would never have thought that they had missed 2 weeks of action. And they didn't even get to practice really that much over these past 2 weeks. They went up against the Bills team. It was, on paper, supposed to be a great game. You had the 4-0 Bills, 3-0 Titans, but Tennessee completely demolished Buffalo. They got a few turnovers from Josh Allen. One interception wasn't his fault, as he hit the receiver in the chest. He just didn't catch it, bounced off of him, and Malcolm Butler got the interception. Oddly enough, Malcolm Butler intercepted him later in the game, but that one was just a late pass, and Butler jumped the route and he made the play. But the play from the game that I'm sure most of you have seen, once again, YouTube, Twitter, wherever, Derrick Henry did what Derrick Henry does. It seems like at least once every couple of games he has a highlight where he stiff arms a defender, usually a cornerback, and kind of embarrasses them. This time it happened to be Josh Norman, where, I mean, he stiff armed him, and you would have thought Josh Norman was going to fly out of the stadium. And I mean, Henry is a dangerous weapon for Tennessee, because Tannehill, the quarterback, has finally come into his own and has become a really good quarterback. He's become accurate, and he's also implementing his scrambling ability into his game, which he could always scramble, but he didn't really have the arm to go with it, so he was never really a threat through the air. But now, I mean, you have to put him up there with the other dual threat quarterbacks in the league. Mahomes, Wilson, Tannehill. Josh Allen's another guy who's pretty mobile. You have Lamar Jackson, although Jackson still hasn't, his arm still doesn't match his legs in terms of being a threat, but that's obviously kind of the trend the NFL's going in. Dual threat quarterbacks, which you turn on any college game, you'll usually see two dual threat quarterbacks facing each other. So only makes sense that they're going to run the NFL pretty shortly. But yeah, for the Titans being off a couple of weeks, limited practices, I mean, they looked better than I would have expected. So I think it's about time to, really put Tennessee as not just the top team in the AFC, but maybe a top team in the NFL. So those are the top three stories I feel from this past week. There's some other stories out there. Yeah, honorable mention, Alex Smith finally got back on the field after his gruesome leg injury from a couple of years ago. It was great to see. He didn't perform that well because, I mean, Washington was in a tough game, but it was just good to see him out there. I mean, he took a couple of hits. There were some moments where it was a little sketchy, but he made it through, and it looks like he might be the quarterback going forward. So would like to see if maybe he can get into a rhythm and, get to finish out his career. So Shout out to Alex Smith. So, speaking of Tennessee and possibly being the top team in the league, feels like a perfect segue into my top 10 teams after week 5. So, of course, we'll start 10, work our way up to 1. For me, number 10 team in the league, I think it's the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, of course, the win over the Chiefs, big reason why. And it seems like, the Raiders followed kind of what's been the trend against Kansas City. You look back to the game with the Patriots, where they basically just rushed 3-4 guys, sat a bunch of people back in coverage, and forced Mahomes to make a decision on, who to get it to. If he's not on time, is he going to try to force it into a tight window? And if he does, then you may have a chance to get an interception as long as you make the play. And if you can get a couple of turnovers on Kansas City, then you have a good chance at winning the game. So the Raiders did that. Josh Jacobs, their star running back, had a good day. Derek Carr had a great performance. And Derek Carr got the ball downfield, which has been a thing that's been a knock on him, where he's a guy who has a strong arm, but he seems to want to dink and dunk down the field. Not against Kansas City. Against Kansas City, he was airing it out, and he was finding guys open downfield. I mean, if you just look at Henry Ruggs, the rookie wide receiver, his stat line. Now, get this. He had 2 catches, which you're like, okay, so. But for like 118 yards. And that tells you all you need to know right there. He used his speed, got behind the defense, found open space, and Carr got it to him. And he had 2 pretty easy touchdowns. I mean, he had 1 touchdown. I think he was stopped short of the goal line on 1 catch. But that's kind of going to be the blueprint going forward against Kansas City, because Kansas City, even though they lost that game, they're still a major threat to go back to back because they have so many weapons on offense. And now that Andy Reid has seen this a couple of times, of course he's gonna have to make some adjustments. But I mean, the Raiders, went and played that game plan out to a T. So the Raiders are my number 10 team. Number 9, I got to give it to the Chicago Bears. Now, the Bears, we've talked about them before, but they've had an up and down kind of season where the first 2 weeks, Trubisky got a couple of wins. He wasn't spectacular in either game, but hey, a win's a win. Then he has that bad first half against the Falcons, struggles third quarter. They take him out. Nick Foles comes in, leads them to a comeback. Then the following week, Nick Foles gets his first start, and he lays an egg against the Colts, but the Colts have a great defense, so whatever. And then they come back this week, and they get a big win. So now they're 4-1. They're right there on Green Bay's heels in the NFC North. So. And then with that defense, once the weather in Chicago becomes a little colder, you start getting elements there. They could have a good little home field advantage because the Bears crowd is a rowdy crowd as well, as long as the team is in the race. So Chicago may become a tough place to play as the season goes on. And that could definitely help them, especially division-wise, get some big wins and stay in the playoff race. Number 8 team, I'm going with the Cleveland Browns. Now, Cleveland's a team who I'm usually excited to watch them play. I'm a big fan of Baker Mayfield. I know when he came in the league, there were a lot of comparisons to Johnny Manziel as, the cocky, brash quarterback, may not live up to expectations, might be out of the league or a backup in no time. But I mean, if the Browns keep winning, you got to give Baker Mayfield his due. And with Odell Beckham, getting involved in the offense this year, he and Jarvis Landry, great weapons on the outside. They have Nick Chubb, who's banged up, but what a luxury. They have Kareem Hunt as a backup running back. And Kareem Hunt was a couple of years ago, was one of the top running backs, at least rushing yards wise, in the league. So it's not a bad backup to go to. And defensively, they have Myles Garrett, who is looking like the best defensive lineman in the league over the past couple of weeks. So if he can keep that up, then the Browns are a team that can contend in the AFC North, where you have the Steelers, the Ravens, and now the Browns are all 4-1. And I mean, sure, the Bengals are like 1-3-1, but even the Bengals with Joe Burrow, there's some excitement there. So the AFC North is going to be tough. But if Cleveland can keep playing the way they are, I mean, why can't that division get 3 playoff teams? Especially with the added playoff team this year, it's possible. Maybe the Browns will get that playoff spot finally. Kevin Stefanski, first coach in Cleveland in a few years that looks competent at his job. So definitely Cleveland's a team I will be watching going forward. Number 7, I'm going with the LA Rams. Now, the Rams had their Super Bowl year. They went up against the Patriots a couple of years ago. Then they were a little bit on the downturn. They had some personnel decisions they had to make. Mainly, they let Gurley go, and he's now in Atlanta. But the Rams seem like they're back. I mean, Cooper Kupp is, doing Cooper Kupp. Top target for Jared Goff. They have a running game with Malcolm Brown is his name, and Aaron Donald on defense. And Aaron Donald is probably the biggest wrecking ball in the NFL defensive line wise. He's a guy you always have to put 2, sometimes 3 linemen on, which then opens up blitz lanes for their linebackers. But yeah, the Rams are playing great defense right now. Their offense is getting the job done. So once again, another tough division with the Seahawks as well. Arizona's still hanging in there. So Rams are number 7. Number 6, I'm going to the Baltimore Ravens. To some people, this might be a little low, but I still have some questions about Lamar Jackson. Like, defensively, the Ravens are good defensively. Their defense is good enough to definitely be a Super Bowl team, but I think Lamar Jackson still has to get better throwing the ball through the air. And until he shows consistently that he can beat teams with his arm, I got to keep them around 6 right now. Because what's to say, like, you play Steelers, Chiefs, or Patriots, or Browns or something in the playoffs, you get into a shootout, can you rely on Jackson to throw you back into a game, or are you going to sit there and continue to run the ball, try to come back that way? So with that's why I think Baltimore is number 6. I mean, they are 4-1, but the only real test they've had this year was Kansas City, and we all saw how that game went. Kansas City blew them out of the stadium. So until Baltimore gets a big win, they'll probably stay in the 6-10 range. Number 5, I'm going Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, Patriot fan. It's usually pretty tough to give Pittsburgh Steelers any credit for anything, but I mean, I've watched them a couple of times this year, and I gotta say, their defense does look good, but we've said that previous years before, and then they would go up against Tom Brady or somebody who would just destroy their defense, and they come up short. But Roethlisberger right now, he looks pretty good. Now, we'll have to see if he can continue that all year, avoid injury and all that. But the biggest story for the Steelers is Chase Claypool, the rookie wide receiver that they drafted. Seems like the Steelers always have great wide receivers. Well, Claypool's the next one in line. He had a big day Sunday with 3-4 touchdowns through the air. And he's becoming Big Ben, Ben Roethlisberger, is becoming his favorite target. I mean, you still have Juju Smith-Schuster, but it seems like Schuster is more of a complimentary wide receiver than a number one target. So maybe Claypool can take over and become the number one option. That way they can, continue to have success in that division. Because like I said, with Baltimore and Cleveland, at least right now, it looks like the three of them are going to be fighting it out to win that division and possibly go for the top seed in the AFC. Because as you know, with the extra playoff team, only the number one seed gets a bye this year. So 2 through 7 have to play each other in the first round anyway. So everybody's going to be fighting to get that number one spot. Number 4 team, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought about maybe putting them a little lower on the list, but I feel like, with Baltimore being 6 to me, Kansas City did beat them. And having them a spot ahead of Pittsburgh makes some sense. And when you hear the top 3 teams, you'll probably be like, okay, I get why you put them there. But yeah, so Kansas City did lose to the Raiders, but, Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins was out, but it shouldn't be that long of an injury. Mecole Hardman, Edwards-Helaire, the running back. So they have all the weapons on offense. Defensively, there are some questions that are arising. You have Tyrann Mathieu, the safety who, plays down in the box. Coverage-wise, he's, pretty decent. But teams are starting to show that, if your quarterback can stay upright, you can find openings in the defense and put up points against Kansas City. Now, Kansas City isn't really worried about that because they feel like their offense can make more than make up for any deficiencies defensively that they may have. But it's going to be something that's going to be, bear watching going forward. Like how many of these top tier teams, make Kansas City look vulnerable. Like I'm not worried about them beating lower level teams. They're great enough to do that. But going up against, looking in the AFC, yeah, they demolished Baltimore, but it was early in the year, maybe Baltimore, whatever. But going up against teams like Pittsburgh and Tennessee, even if they had to face like the Raiders again, how would they look? So unless Mahomes is absolutely perfect and they score like 35, 40 points, they got to worry about actually losing some of these games come playoff time. But like I said before with the Raiders, Andy Reid is a great offensive mind. I'm sure he'll come up with some game plan scheme to, counteract what defenses are starting to do to them. But if they don't, the back-to-back talk might have to end because they may not be able to get out of the AFC to get to another Super Bowl, at least this year. So they're my number 4 team. Number 3, I'm going with Green Bay Packers. Now, all the talk in the offseason, how was this team going to look? Why did they draft Jordan Love? All that's going to do is, anger Aaron Rodgers. And then what's that going to do to him? Will it turn into, Green Bay fans turning on Aaron Rodgers and wanting to see Jordan Love? Is Jordan Love even ready to step into the number 1 spot if Aaron Rodgers was to leave? I don't know. But as of right now, who cares? Because if he was angry in the offseason, he's turned that into motivation for this season because all the Packers are doing It's putting up points. And defensively, they're performing well right now. Packers have that same, advantage as the Chicago Bears, where as the season gets going, we get into those winter months. Green Bay becomes a tough place to play with that frozen tundra. You'll get some snow games, I'm sure, this year. And Aaron Rodgers has already shown that he can perform in that weather, but some of these other teams go in there, especially, some of the dome teams who may make the playoffs and then have to go to Green Bay. And as history has shown us, dome teams struggle in outdoor weather cities once the temperature starts going down. So yeah, I've got Green Bay number 3. Number 2, after what I watched from Tennessee last night, I think Tennessee's number 2 in the NFL. Because, you look at it, they have a great running game. They have a quarterback who's playing great, Ryan Tannehill. They have offensive weapons with A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith. They still have, what's his name? I forgot the wide receiver's name. He's kind of on the outs right now, but if you're going to tell me he's going to come back and he could be the third wide receiver in that offense, it's a pretty dangerous offense. And you can't key in on the run because Tannehill will, destroy you with the pass. If you try to play zone, Derrick Henry will just run it down your throat. So they have the perfect balance on offense. Defensively, they play solid defense. They have corners who can, attack the ball. They have Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson. Adoree Jackson's hurt right now, but he's supposed to be coming back. So yeah, Tennessee right now, they look like the best team in the AFC easily. Yeah. And Mike Vrabel, who's, letting everybody know that he's a coach that's here to stay in this league for years to come. What he's done with that Tennessee team has been just outstanding. Tennessee, all those years under Jeff Fisher and whatever, they were kind of a middle of the road team. But since Vrabel's taken over, he's taken them to that next level where I'm kind of expecting to see Tennessee in a Super Bowl here next couple of years, if not this year. So that leaves number 1 team. I'm sure a lot of you could guess it. No, it's not my New England Patriots. I didn't go homer on you. But it's the Seattle Seahawks. Now, if you've heard my recap shows for the NFL, you know how much I am a Russell Wilson fan. And he did it again on Sunday night. They went up against the Vikings in a great game. Kirk Cousins performed well. Minnesota played about as perfect as they wanted. They went down, they're in position to score late. They decided to go for it on a 4th and 1. Seattle's defense stepped up, stopped them. They gave Wilson the ball, and Russell Wilson, he had the ball with a minute 45 left, I think, needing a touchdown to win the game. And what did he do? Drove them down the field, had some big plays on a couple of 4th down conversions he had to make. DK Metcalf showed up on that drive, made the tough catch in the end zone, ultimately to win the game. And I believe he made the catch on the other 4th down to extend the drive. And it was, like I said, it was a great game, great win for Seattle. Minnesota is a team that struggled early on in the season, but they're starting to come into, form right now. And, they're a team that could easily make a run over the next, 10, 11 weeks and get back into the conversation. So Seattle beating them was a good win for them. And yeah, if they can get, timely defense where Wilson doesn't feel like he has to put up 35, 40 points for them to win. And, it could be something where all Wilson has to do is get, like 28, 30 points on the board. Then Seattle could easily be there in the end and, maybe upset some people, because I'm sure Green Bay may be like the favorite right now to go to the Super Bowl or whatever. But I think Seattle, the way they're playing right now, I don't see anybody beating them. And Seattle's another place where, later in the season they start getting that rain falling there. I mean, they have the retractable roof, but I think through the sides of the stadium, weather still gets in. It's an interestingly built stadium. It looks great, but it's interesting. And if Seattle ever gets to the point this year where they can have some fans there, I think they did Sunday night, now that I think about it, but Seattle has a great fan base, so that's going to be another part of the home field advantage for them. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 teams after week 5. Like I said, going forward, I'm going to do this, so we'll have to see how that list looks come week 6. Who moves up, who moves down, any new teams find their way in there. You'll have to tune in for that come next week. But I guess the last thing I want to talk about real quickly before I get into my picks, I have not forgotten about that. But so if any of you watch baseball, and for the baseball fans out there, I will work baseball in as we're almost to the World Series, so I will have to do a World Series preview for sure. But remember when MLB started their restart and they had that breakout with the Miami Marlins, and everybody's like, oh man, how are they going to ever finish the season? And, blah, blah, blah. And they found a way to get through it. I believe every team played 60 games as they were supposed to. And they made it through the playoffs and everything. And it seems like they're going to get their season finished without another outbreak of COVID cases. So the NFL kind of went through that with Tennessee from a couple of weeks ago, where they ended up with like 25 players and coaches testing positive, that shut down the facility for days on end, do an investigation to see if there were safe practices going on and all that. But could it be that will be the one blip on the radar going forward? Of course, the MLB had the same situation where you had the Cardinals come with some tests and some other teams here and there. NFL's had that with Falcons with a couple of players, Patriots a couple of players, Saints a player, Chiefs a player, stuff like that. So I think the NFL going forward, whatever schedule that you see for each week with like the Sunday slate, Monday night game, consider that a work in progress. I think we may see 2 Monday night games going forward. That could be a regular thing. And some weeks you might get a Tuesday game. Just got to bear with it. And the NFL's already talked about adding in a week 18 at the end of the year, because the NFL season is usually 17 weeks. But the NFL realizes that they may have to set aside a week 18 for teams where a game may get kicked till later in the year. And if they can't find anywhere to fit the game in, at least you'll have a week 18 where you can stash your game and just keep going with the season. Hopefully teams don't have to miss more than one game, because then week 18 will come and you'll still be a game short. And the NFL also announced that they've postponed the Pro Bowl, which if you're like me, you're like, well, that's not really big news anyway, because I haven't watched the NFL Pro Bowl in I don't know how long. There's no point in watching it. So maybe this leads to them just doing away with the Pro Bowl and coming up with something else. My suggestion has always been like a skills challenge type thing or something. Just something that's more exciting than what they do for the Pro Bowl. Most guys don't want to go. And it basically is a two-hand touch game, so I mean, nobody watches it. So that was just my quick little take on, the NFL just has to stay fluid. Players have to stay fluid. fans, you got to do the same thing. Your team may be expected to play Sunday. They may end up playing Tuesday, or they may get a impromptu bye week, and then you just got to wait till next week. That's football in 2020. But with that, come to the end of the show. So it's time to review my NFL picks. Now, last week I went 4-2 for the second week in a row. Overall record 12-11. I had 6 games this week, so let's go ahead and see how well I did. First game was the Thursday night game. I did take the Bucs over the Bears. If you watch the game, the Bears ended up winning the game 20-19. They were a 5.5 point underdog, so that's a loss for me. So, yeah, 0-1 so far. Next game I took, I picked the Cardinals to beat the Jets. The Jets were a 6.5 point underdog at home, and the Cardinals won that game easy, 30-10. So that is a win. Next game, I took the Steelers as a 6.5 point favorite at home to beat the Eagles. Steelers beat the Eagles 38-29. So that's another win for me. Then the next game, which I guess was my upset of the week, even though it's not really much of an upset because I didn't understand why the Falcons were favorite, but I picked the Panthers to beat the Falcons as the Falcons were a 3.5 point home favorite. Panthers won the game 23-16, so that was another win for me. Sunday night game, the Seahawks were a 7.5 point home favorite against the Vikings. I picked the Seahawks in that game. They did win the game 27-26, but I guess quick little side note. So with the Seahawks being a 7.5 point favorite, they had to win the game by at least 7.5 points. They only won by 27-26. So that counts as a loss against the spread. And then final game was the Monday game where I took the Chargers over the Saints. The Saints are a 7.5 point home favorite. Once again, the Saints did win the game 30-27, but they didn't win by more than 7.5. So me picking the Chargers is another win. So recap, I got the Bucs pick over the Bears wrong, and the Seahawks pick over the Vikings wrong. But I got the Cardinals over the Jets right, Steelers over the Eagles right, Panthers over the Falcons right, Chargers over the Saints. So that's another 4-2 week. And so that means I am 16-13 on the season. I believe that's what, 56%. Like I said, I'm shooting for 60% by the end of the year. I'm getting closer to that number each week. So it's another 4-2 week. Once again, I'm giving y'all winners, at least for the past 3 weeks. And I'm expecting to stay on this trend going forward, as I'm kind of figuring out each team's tendencies. And I've seen enough of these teams play to know what's going on. So, giving you winners, do with them what you want. So, that's it for my NFL recap. Looking ahead to the rest of the episodes this week. Of course, week 6 is around the corner, so I will have to do a preview for that. There is no Thursday night game this week, as it was supposed to be Buffalo versus Kansas City, but Buffalo literally just played Tuesday, so that game gets pushed to, I think that becomes the second Monday night game. So the recap, week 6 preview, I'll just take the whole week in one episode instead of doing the Thursday night game first and then Sunday, Monday games in another episode. It'll just be one episode this week. And then I'll also, like I said before, by some point this week, the World Series matchup could be set up. So we'll do a preview of that. I will also get back into basketball. We'll look at some of the news around the NBA in terms of the coaching searches, as well as the topic I did tease while the NBA Finals are still going on. The whole Jordan LeBron debate, which I'm sure you've heard from everybody else. Hey, why not hear it from me? So yeah, plenty of stuff coming down the line this week, going into next week. So definitely appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. As I say in every episode, like what you heard, definitely hit the like button. Whatever platform you listen to the podcast on, subscribe, follow. That way, whenever I drop an episode, you get notified. And if you have followed the Facebook page, or if you follow the show on Twitter, appreciate if you would drop a comment of topics you want me to talk about, or your reaction to any of the stuff that I've said in this episode, or any questions you may have in terms of understanding sports a little better. Like I said, if you're a casual fan or you're just new to sports in general, I'm here to help you out. So with that, thank you for tuning in again, and be safe out there. I'll definitely catch you the next episode. All right.